TopMedTalk.
Well, hello and welcome to Anesthesiology 2021. TopMedTalk is here in person, broadcasting live from the exhibition hall at the annual meeting of the American Society of Anesthesiologists in beautiful, sunny San Diego, and it feels so good. I'm Desiree Chappell. I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my co-host, Professor Monty Mythen from the University College London, and our editor-in-chief of TopMedTalk. Hello, Monty. Good morning.
Desiree, great to be here.
It is great to be here. I'm actually glad that you are here in America. We didn't know if it was going to happen.
It's a real treat. I know it's sorry to everyone who,
couldn't make it.
You couldn't make it, and those people who are still dealing with all the challenges back home, if that's where you are in the cycle of things. But it is good to be here, and I think it is refreshing to realize there's some semblance of normality is returning.
That's right. Absolutely. And Professor Sol Aronson, thank you so much for joining us.
Equally happy to be here. It's so bizarre because we've been seeing and talking to each other for so long over Zoom, and those calls are very high fidelity. But to actually see somebody in real time in 3 dimensions is just just crazy, and it's nice to be back in the real world.
Of course, you want to hug everybody, and we know we're in the exhibit hall because I'm hearing monitors. I feel like I'm in the OR right now.
But I think next to there's a SimStat, brilliant SimStat station. But I think they're going to get into some arrest situations.
Yeah,
so
we're not going to respond to CPR call right now. Let's decide that.
If there is a code
blue.
don't think bad of us if we don't
move. If we don't move. That's right. Well, if you're new to TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of evidence-based perioperative medicine. We're going to talk a lot about this throughout the day. So if you've heard this spiel, that's okay. But Monty, tell us just really quickly about evidence-based perioperative medicine.
So 25 years old next year. For those of you who are listening to each of those, I'm sorry to repeat the message here, but 25 years old next year. Really at the sort of the start of the debate, which was very much prompted by lectures at the ASA going back 30 years ago, to say, where are we as anesthesia providers in the journey to or with perioperative medicine? So 25 years old, and it looks as though now, I'm sure we'll get into it talking to our guests, is perioperative medicine it's not I don't think it's a debate anymore.
No.
It's where we are. It's what we do with it is where we've got to.
Yeah. And Sol, you've been in this space for a very long time. We've been talking about it.
7-8 years now.
Yeah.
And obviously APOM had its roots 25 years ago, but since then we branched off into all kinds of cool little venues. We have a program that's in Ireland. We have, a USA program that's now kind of dug itself, into a Chicago base, and of course London's been, there forever and ever. So EPOM is really having an international reach that's growing and growing.
Yeah. And like a lot of other groups and organizations, we have a podcast, and that is TopMedTalk.
Free open access medical education.
That's right.
Well, you're here listening to us. You must have worked out. You
figured it out. If you're in the exhibit hall, it's live.epom.org is where you can go to find more information and start listening. But, TopMedTalk we have over 1.4 million downloads. Over how many podcasts do we have now, Monty? It exhausts me when I hear it.
I think we've got over 1,500 now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's a lot of content.
You've got to take a year off to listen to.
But you can find just about anything
the search engine's great.
On TopMedTalk.com is great.
A lot of content.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we want to say very quickly before we get to our guest, thank you so much to the ASA for the support to be here. We wouldn't be here without you. So it is. And then to our industry sponsor, we started with Edwards Life Sciences back in 2017, right?
They were our Kickstart sponsor for the podcast series. Big, again, shout out to them for the bravery to turn around and say, this is a great idea. Unrestricted grant, got us going. You always need to get money from somewhere, but thank you.
Yeah, it is so much gratitude for that. We are able to offer TopMedTalk literally to the world and get this information out to people who can't make it to meetings like this, right? So, all right. And so we have our first guest. So without further ado, I would love to introduce, and it's a pleasure, and I'm really excited about this conversation, actually, is Dr. Kamal Maheshwari from the Cleveland Clinic. Kamal, thank you so much for joining us.
No, I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to be here. There's so much emotions because when I took my flight, I was like, oh, airports, huh? After so many...
How do I do this?
Yeah. So, as we said earlier, it is amazing. The human experience is basically in person. It cannot.
Yeah.
We always live in our virtual world. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, Kamal, for our listeners and viewers today, tell us a little bit about the work that you do at Cleveland Clinic.
So I'll start from when I was born. No, I'm not no.
29 years ago.
Yeah. No, so I grew up in India. I did my medicine and anesthesia training in the University of Delhi. I moved to U.S. in 2005. And 2009, I joined Cleveland Clinic. That was quick, huh? And so I did my, with the interest into ultrasound technology and all this stuff. At that time, acute pain renal anesthesia was just picking up. Okay, we did the so-called Beanie Fellowship and tried to build that program within Cleveland Clinic. Equally excited about hemodynamics. So they said we want people in liver transplant team with your prior training. Can you help us? Okay, we got into the liver transplant, echo board. So whatever comes onto my place, that looks exciting. Let's do it. Until in 2012, when with all the initial excitement, board certification and everything was done, I was like, what do I do now? So my interest was on health policy and management. The reason being is I always wanted the why of what we are doing, and be it in medicine, and you can ask my daughter and my wife, and I'm unknowing about that, why. So that why led to getting into this health policy and management. Went to Hopkins, and then that kind of changed my thinking altogether. When you go dedicated into a certain field, then the research component, the data, answering the why with the data come into play. And I come back, in 2015-ish, and we had at Cleveland Clinic an amazing outcome research department, which I did not even care before 2015, frankly. I first time reached out at that, I want to do research, and I have this question. And the first question was, why people all keep talking about saline or lactated ringer?
Saline or lactated ringers. Okay.
IV fluid choice, right? And this is about the same time, actually, I met Monty. Because I said, okay, let's see what's going on in this field. I attended the first perioperative surgical home conference. And, I remember the potato chips on Monty's slide, Lay's.
Stolen from somebody else.
But irrespective, that got me into the debates. Like, what are the real questions in clinical practice? And we cannot just answer them by, reading one paper or something. It is much more complex. It's very, very complex. And that led to my first proposal, which is the SOLAR trial, which is now published. But that is the first protocol I wrote over 9 months. And thanks to my mentor, Dan Sessler, I could have quit at any point of time.
So Kamal, if I could, because not everyone's going to know the trial. So a quick thumbnail sketch of the trial design and the principal, result from that.
Yeah. So the SOLAR trial was the pragmatic alternating intervention trial. And what does that mean is that we did not have an individual consent from a patient. Yeah. We thought that lactated ringer and normal saline are equally used without, much care, whichever fence you are in non-cardiac surgery. And why is that so?
So a very cool and efficient way of testing common practice where there appears to be equipoise, because most things are on the shelf.
And the reason that trial has to be pragmatic is because it has to be large. Yes. You cannot do a 50-patient or 100-patient trial for an outcome which is so rare, between 1% to 5%. And that's what we wanted, the power right.
So how many patients did you study?
It was more than 8,000 patients.
Whoa, well done.
Over how long?
This was over 2 years, very efficient design. And we were able to answer the question at hand that, in non-cardiac surgery, when we give only 2 liters of fluid on an average, it does not matter. So see, the context matter. I made a statement that trial was good or bad, no, but I said that in non-cardiac surgery, when you have...
And that's a really important message.
Yeah.
And the really important part of it is it maps directly onto the preclinical. I'm a big fan of going through the phases.
Yes.
So if you look at preclinical, you look at the equivalent of phase 1.
Yeah.
You randomise healthy individuals to a litre, doesn't make a difference. 2 litres doesn't make a difference. 3 litres, half of them are getting sick, if you see what I mean. So brilliant. But Kamal, I want to jump you ahead from that to your work you've been doing with Dan Sessler et al. With regards to intraoperative hypotension.
Yeah.
Because it's a crazy hot topic around the world. We've just seen the launch in the European Parliament of a lobbying document about the potentially avoidable harm associated with hemodynamic instability in the Parliament. Okay, about saying this is happening very commonly. All of your guidelines say it shouldn't be happening. And now you're writing papers, which you'll tell us a little bit about in a second, to say it's almost normal for patients to be hypotensive, and some of them are getting... you can't say they're getting hurt. That hypotension is associated with harm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about that journey.
That is very interesting. So around that same time, the other areas which we started studying, and there were the results from the Vision trial, not the Vision trial, the POISE trials were out, and we were trying to figure out, our group was trying to figure out what was going on in there, and hypotension came out to be an issue. And that's where, right time, I was primed for asking questions. And they said, okay, this is the project, start working on it if you're interested. So I read about it, and that's how it started. And so the problem definition is the first thing, irrespective of whatever you're doing. And that's what I learned. And the first few papers were just describing what exactly is happening. So, our research fellow, Salmasi, was there. I guided them, so we were working together on this project with our group, and we first described how much hypertension is there, and what is the association of these hypertension with common problems in a way. Because then common problems, I'll say, is myocardial injury, kidney injury, and mortality. With that description came a huge amount of learning, because we did not know what is hypertension. What level you're going to say, how much you're going to say, how many minutes you're going to say, you're going to take into account the depth of the hypertension. That complexity was a huge learning experience.
And what we get into in subsequent discussions, not for this particular conversation, is what caused it.
Yeah.
Because pathophysiologically, you'd think that if it was caused by a vasodilating agent and you'd maintain volume and flow, it's probably different to if it's as a result of hemorrhage. Yeah. Now, we were looking through our history of conversations at the ASA, and we put a mashup together, which is available in our podcast section. And one of the first conversations we had was with Dan Sessler. You referred to Dan Sessler, one of your, let's call him a boss, but one of your senior partners.
He's boss.
And that conversation was entitled The Elephant in the Room. In other words, one of the difficult conversations we've been having is we seem to be accepting of the fact that hypotension happens, which, and I want to jump through quickly because I want to get to what's coming over the horizon.
Yeah.
We're kind of all accepting that there's an association between intraoperative hypotension and harm. Sol, correct? Agree with that?
I think the data is compelling.
Okay. And there's a sort of threshold that's out there which you can debate, which is 65 millimeter mercury.
That's right. I think the definition of hypotension has now been much more solidly accepted to have an absolute threshold as much as a relative to baseline discussion about that.
And then we could talk about what we do about it, but part of it is, and we've spoken a lot about it on TopMedTalk, and we're not going to get into the detail now because we've recorded lots of conversations, is the ability to predict that hypotension.
Yeah.
And that's the Acumen HPI technology, which I think is uniquely at the moment from Edwards Life Sciences. Yeah. Now, Kamal, you've, I think, used that technology.
Yes. With regards to hypertension, we know that it's a problem. It's described now. So multiple papers we have written in description point of view. Then the logical question comes with how can you prevent it?
Yeah.
Right? And the prevention comes as pathophysiology. That what is the pathophysiology? It's vasodilation, fluid, and all the stuff. So it's a very complex question. We do answer this question mostly by experience. I have seen this thing happen in this case. This will happen, right? But to objectify this whole scenario, that's what lot of prediction algorithms using different type of data. For example, HPI is using arterial pressure waveform. We can use, without arterial pressure waveform, there's multiple groups who have done hypertension prediction using just systolic blood pressure or MAP blood pressure, their frequency of reading. There's a lot of prediction based on multiple other parameters. I don't want to get into detail, but we are in the stage that there are credible prediction algorithms available right now, which can predict hypertension in ICU and in the operating room. And that is a way forward into preventing hypertension, because we know that it's associated with harm.
And for those of you who are not up to speed with this, that's a reality.
Yeah.
It's been a reality for a number of years. It's approved throughout the world for clinical use, and people are out there using it. Now, that's great. That's the weather forecast, which is going to bring us to the bit we want to have the main conversation and get everyone to ask about, which is at the end of our mashup that we recorded about HPI and hypotension. Professor Maxine Cannison, who's currently at the moment working up the road here in Los Angeles, who's a professor of anesthesiology from Europe, but very much one of the sort of acolytes of perioperative medicine, started to talk about the work they'd been doing on closing the loop. So in other words, it's very hard for us as providers to keep up with depth of anesthesia, the fluids, and at some stage the pilots worked out that you had to have fly-by-wire. You had to let the computers help to keep the show on the road, to keep the sailboat going in one direction, which brings us to a closed-loop system. I think you've been working with the closed-loop system, or you can nuance that.
I will definitely nuance that. And so I'll preface this discussion that when we start talking about closed loops, semi-closed loops, or some computer algorithms, the question is like, AI, artificial intelligence. And yesterday I heard a very interesting quote that the physicians who are using artificial intelligence will replace physicians who are not using artificial intelligence. That's the future. It's not that the artificial intelligence will replace the physician.
Like the pilots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and then coming back to the discussion on the fluid, so that is one of the technologies which is coming most close to reality in real time. In fact, with FDA approval, and I'll tell you that we already have FDA approval on one of the products in that, which is assisted fluid management technology.
Assisted fluid management. Which is because we're going to talk about the abbreviation AFM, because we don't have enough TLAs. So AFM is which is not a radio station.
It's like the Army.
So, and briefly, I'll tell them what AFM is. So work done by Maxine when he was in UC Irvine and Joe Reinhardt, and so develop a system that how can we guide clinician when to give fluid. So this is a very important decision, when to give fluid. And the second important decision is how much to give it. Right, so these are two important decisions which comes in. And can we automate that? So normally in our literature we have seen that goal-directed therapy, the when decision is decided that, okay, if you think the stroke volume will go up when you give enough fluid, you should give fluid. But this is again a very complex problem to tell that when the stroke volume will go to increase. And that's what AFM software does. Not going into too much detail, but it uses the population level data, right, which we use all the time for our research, right? But importantly, it uses the individual response to fluid bolus information in real time and feed it back to the loop. And this is an important advance in this technology which has happened, that not only we are getting information that, okay, this software works for all of them, but we're also getting information from you as a patient that when I gave you fluid, what happened, that information comes back to the algorithm and we use it.
Okay,
and
Kamal, because I'm going to bring Desiree in and then Sol to pick that apart a little bit. So we're in the operating room. We've got a patient on the table having major non-cardiac surgery. We're all set up with more, with all the technology we have available. There's lots coming at us. We now have a bit of computer advice that pings and says, you might want to think about giving a fluid bolus here.
Yeah.
Because the information's telling me that I think this patient might need a fluid bolus. But you make that decision. It's advisory to you at the moment, is it?
So it's clinical decision support. Is that what we would call it?
It's the decision is that the only thing which shows is that please give fluid. It's up to you. You want to give it or not. And let me just, because it's going to answer the question, because the trial which we did, they're going to answer the couple of questions which are going to be follow-up. So once the technology is made, you have to do real life what happens in the system. So that we use in a national multi-center, all the major centers in the United States were part of it. You name and they were part of it. And we studied more than 300 patients in which software was used. It gave the prompt, right? So gave the prompt and we gave the bolus. So that's one arm, right?
So one arm is you trust the computer.
You trust the computer and you did it, what it asked you to do.
Unless you thought it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And the second thing was the clinician. I want to give bolus right now. I feel like it needs to happen. And that is another bolus. So you have two kind of boluses coming into play, right? And which one do you think is better, right? So the way you're going to quantify this thing is, did the stroke volume increase?
Yeah.
When software recommended bolus was given compared to when clinician thought that it's going to increase, but did it increase, right?
So I'm going to pause you there for a second. We'll have some votes. Which one do you think won?
Well, let me think about that one. The computer, for sure.
The computer helping the clinician.
Yes.
We don't know that yet. Sol?
So I'm biased and probably have a good idea already, but I would say my guess is that the computer was, the limb with the advantage. Though it's a complex medical decision, and physiology is complex.
True.
So what were the guardrails of the conditions by which this, if you will, comparative analysis was performed?
Yeah, so let's get to the result first.
Yeah. Did my colleagues win the prize?
So whenever software gave a fluid bolus, the stroke volume increased appropriately.
Yeah.
We are getting into the 10%, 50, whatever strategy you was using. So the strategy was also defined.
Yeah.
But overall analysis was that more than 60% of the time, and 66% to be exact, the software recommended fluid bolus result in appropriate increase in stroke volume, which we wanted, right? If I was running restrictive fluid management or whatever management, it went through. On the clinician side, it was only 40%. So when clinician gave bolus, only 40% of fluid boluses, and which is a wide gap. When we initially powered the study, it was powered based on only 30% response rate, which was there from the optimized data, which Dr. McDonald published.
Yep.
So, if it's a huge improvement, if you believe in the question that stroke volume increase is the right thing to assess the fluid responsiveness, right? And so that's why the nuance here is that we first agreed on the rule, hey, this is the right thing to do if this is the right measure, and then we tested the proposals.
And hold that for a second, so hold that for a second, because I just want to add one nuance to it, because you said it earlier on, and then I promised to be quiet for a while. And that
I take bets on that one.
And that was, you told us that after that first fluid bolus, the machine started to learn.
Yes.
So it started to learn and said, hey, that was a great idea. Well, how about another one? Because what I learned from the last one, looking at things that you can't see, all that clever analysis, is that was a great decision.
This was, as I said, that from advancement in technology, that is the major, continuous learning component is the major advancement. So the paper is out in anesthesiology. I would recommend people to read it, understand it, because it's a complex analysis and complex paper. But at the same time, this is happening because FDA has approved this software.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And
that's a first, is it?
After HPI software, this is the next software. And in fact, the next iteration of the software, I don't know how much I can disclose or whatever, but I'm going to say it anyways.
You're amongst friends.
So is that
just
thousands of them?
Is that the next iteration? Is that to make it closed loop that you have to communicate with some kind of a fluid system, right?
But not completely closed?
No,
loop?
not
Open,
completely.
more of an
No,
open
no,
loop.
but it's just the
Enclosed
task. Is the task which you have to do after to give the fluid bolus, right? Is to measure the amount of fluid which you have given. So the fluid measurement technology, including that if 300 ml or 500 ml given, right, we want accurately to go back to the system.
Yeah.
Because system needs to know all boluses are not equal. So that's
So many questions. Firstly, congratulations. Let's not lose focus of the point here, which is the technology is enabling one to do something that heretofore we could not do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's way cool. And it's just the first of what will be a cascade of advances. And I think this is inevitable and something that we have to adopt and accept. And that's way cool. Where to begin? The clinicians who were enabled to be better, to be smarter, to know more, if you will, to improve their acuity of the situation by 20%. Was there a receptiveness? Was there an acceptance? What was the cultural acceptance of the study is something that I would, begin to ask, though I have many, many layers of questions.
Yeah. No, I think to some extent there was the element of surprise. And to some extent, there was an element of eventually after the two moment of surprise. Yeah, it does make sense, because when I usually make a decision, I usually go by the number of hours. Or here, if somebody is actually looking into arterial pressure waveform, going into parameters like stroke volume variation to dynamic elastance to all this information which is there. And you already have data from people, you are learning from the previous bolus. Yeah, there's too much going on that it does make sense that it performed better, right? And obvious logical next question would be that when it comes to the practice that, okay, it helped clinician, it'll be more about, how they improve the workflow of the clinicians, right? The cognitive burden of a lot of decisions. So anesthesiologists are known, or critical care physicians are known for making it multiple decisions in a small area. Here, only one decision is offloaded, and now your cognitive power is there to make much more decisions which we are ignoring. Those things remains to be seen, and that's what I'm interested in, the implementation science behind it. That how does it impact the overall care and outcomes? Because, that's my hardcore as an outcome researcher. We're going to eventually look into the impact on outcomes.
Brilliant. My shut up Monty alarm is shouting at
No,
me. Desiree.
No.
Oh, you have an alarm over there.
No, well, I mean, one of my main roles is trying, how do we implement these things? Because, I mean, it's a challenge. All of us think we do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And for a machine to tell us that, they know something that we don't is very hard. I mean, what is the messaging? Like, how do we get this out here? Because to me, when I am trying to get a clinician to use a new monitor, new technology, I put it next to them and just say, watch it. Is it aligning with what you would do clinically first? Don't follow it first.
Yeah.
Do what you're going to do, and does it track on that?
Yeah.
I mean, what are some of the things that you guys work on?
On the implementation, I mean, definitely it has to fit in a workflow in a seamless way, right? And that's the way. Then that goes back to how every workflow is made, and you have to actually critically examine that thing, that workflow, and how does it fit into that. And more important is that, high quality research can always guide, if it is in a high quality research, you are able to prove that this improves outcome, there'll be no agency in the world who will not say why you are not using it. As you pointed out in Parliament, like if people know in common sense this does improve outcomes, right? Clinicians have to comply. I mean, that's the other extreme of it. But in between, they can learn that these education, that's the other component of it, you educate them that why this is better.
Yeah.
Right? It is not a magic that a number popping out, a random number. It is happening because of, continuous learning, all these parameters which you believe in, that education becomes a central component also. And, we were having a discussion with Sol earlier that, a ultimately it's about money too.
Yeah,
right?
It's not
And
about the money.
It's not about the money. It's about the money. Or so I'm a quick learner, I guess. And then it has to. Every new technology have to fit into the paradigm of that practice. Economics and finances. I mean, that's the hardcore truth of modern medicine. I mean, governments are involved. Local, your CEO, everybody is involved into the thing that that what you're buying, what you're doing, if you can show them you're going to improve outcomes or you're going to make change, as ultimately is going to save money to you, then it's I don't want to say it, but it's a win-win situation. But even if it is a winning, so I want only one winning, which is winning for the patient.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, according to me, I'm not caring about the cost, because
but you want value.
I want a patient, if his outcomes can be improved and he wants it, then nobody should stop it, frankly.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, just so we don't get too far in front of our skis here, I think the economics will speak for itself when that becomes. But I think, again, just to bring us back to what I believe is foundational, this is a new technology that is being applied to an old, if you will, practice, and that's cool. And I think it's going to exponentially, accelerate in terms of adaptation. One of the things that we always look at, whether or not we introduce a new drug or a new product or a new technology or process into practice, is that it's safe and efficacious. So I appreciate that the opportunity for this computer algorithm to determine need was more likely to provide information to do that correctly 20% more than a clinician's aptitude. What about false positives? What about dealing with it never told you to do it when you shouldn't do it. It just told you more likely to do it when you should do it. How can you speak to us about the other end of that?
So we did multiple. We looked into this issue with multiple ways, right? So one of the ways, for example, is that, okay, is the total amount of fluid given in this arm when software you're dependent on it is much higher, right? Compared to when clinicians, if you're not dependent on that, right? It was not, right? Was the use of vasopressor was much higher, right? No. So you can look into how it impacted the practice with the common known things, the use of colloids, blood products, multiple metrics of blood pressure. So they were not so far different that we can say that, oh, I see a safety issue. And obviously, I mean, with 300 patients, we cannot comment on the outcomes, right? Because the number of outcomes which was reported, you cannot make any difference.
You don't have the power.
So you didn't study that.
So but at the same time, there's data. The safety board looked into that. Okay, whatever complication happened, is there any way it can be attributed to this software usage? And none, zero.
Yeah. So zero serious adverse events related to the
software itself, intervention itself. So I think you bring a very valid point that, now it shows that software works, right? It helps achieve the goal which you wanted to achieve, right? And if you believe in goal-directed therapy, then you say, oh, goal-directed therapy already proved that, then I don't have to go back to the same question again. But at the same time, yes, all these technology will be and should be studied in RCT fashion. And to allay your concern, for example, HPI, right? So we are doing a large RCT called Smart BP trial.
Excellent.
I got input from my daughters to everyone to name this trial. But finally, I thought that Smart BP trial was a good number because you're managing the BP in a smart way. And it'll be RCT. Half of the group will have it. Half of the group will have a routine care. And we'll see the outcomes. We'll show you the results. It'll be, again, US-based national multi-centers, including 20 centers. We are having a first trial meeting.
And primary outcome variable?
Composite of complications, major complications, including MACE, AKI.
Oh, wow.
And infections. Serious infection, not superficial infection.
So how large is that trial going to be?
1,460.
Yeah, I would guess,
Yeah. And first of all, this is the first time a software will be put to test in such a large trial. We did the pilot trial. We learned a lot from them. And so I think, yes, these should be tested with a high rigor into good trials, and we'll see the results.
So, excellent. I look forward. That's a very cool study. Just to go back just for one moment, in the fluid trial, and I appreciate that there were no safety, signals or adverse signals, but nonetheless, I'm curious, were there any instances, let's say statistically significant or even perhaps anecdotally interesting, where the provider gave a bolus and the algorithm would have not given a bolus? In other words, what is the other end of that sort of point
so
of
I
view?
think all the user boluses, right, at that time software is running. According to software, sit tight. But user decide, I want to give it.
So it was real.
The total number of boluses which was studied was like more than 500 in each group. So it's not like we are deciding based on 10 boluses here, 10 boluses there. There's a good number of boluses which was studied. And one other point, which, other nuance to it. So not only the stroke volume increased appropriately, but the amount of increase, right? So that's another element to it. So percentage of patient whose stroke volume increased, and the amount in mLs, the stroke volume increase was much higher in the AFM. That means that software was going a little bit on the conservative side, not trying to give too much of fluid. But at the same time, that was also that you get real bump. Whenever software was deciding, it was giving a real bump in the stroke volume.
And I might have missed it. Did you say, what was the patient population? We're talking about non-cardiac surgery, but I mean, are they the moderate to high-risk patients? Was this an arterial line? Are we using non-invasives?
Yeah, so both HPI and AFM software right now are mostly based on arterial pressure waveform. We already did a study for HPI algorithm to be on non-invasive. So we published a paper on ClearSight.
Which is the finger cuff.
On the finger cuff. So, but the AFM still has to be kind of tested, validated for the non-invasive cuff. But
the patient population, so we're not talking about like the young and healthy doing
No. I think the always first step in whenever you're doing a novel studies is a pick up when you get the highest bang for the buck. And then if it works out, then slowly kind of, if you cannot treat sick patients, then, I don't know what's the value on the younger patient. But in fact, from standardization or to some extent reducing variation in anesthesia practice, I'm a big believer in technology. As I said, physician who would use technology will definitely perform better physicians who do not. And continuous monitoring into multiple different ways. We are talking about a couple of examples on just blood pressure or hemodynamics. There's a lot of different fields, including urine output to, everything is getting continuous monitoring and smart monitoring. And we're going to see a lot of change. Exciting. I'm very excited about the future of our field.
And the message to everyone is it's practitioner support.
Yes.
It's not, certainly for a few decades probably, the robots are not taking over. The computers are here to help.
So artificial intelligence by definition, I wrote a review article recently, artificial intelligence by definition is that, you mimic human intelligence, but you don't replace human intelligence because human is not doing only one task. Human is much more complex. Right now, you might be thinking about evening dinner plan at the, for that matter. But we are saying that, one decision at a time, can it be automated and standardized so that if it doesn't matter if Monty was there or Sol was there or I was there, that patient gets standardized care, right? It doesn't depend on the clinician who's doing it. I think that's a huge step forward for medicine per se.
All right. You good?
We're good.
All right.
That was excellent.
Kamal, congratulations on everything that you've been doing, and good luck in all your future research, especially the Smart BP. We can't wait to find out more about that. So,
indeed.
No, thank you for having me. I just love this conversation.
Well, we enjoy it as well, and we really do look forward to your work and your research going forward. And again, I just second congratulations. Keep
it up.
Keep us honest and keep pushing that edge.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And regards to all of your colleagues, so your Cleveland Clinic Foundation, Cleveland, Ohio, because we've got our own one in London now.
Oh, yeah. Sooner or later, we have already started some discussions regarding, around the world. Like, we will work as one Cleveland clinic, and there'll be a lot of collaboration now between even our Abu Dhabi campus to
make the trials
London.
quicker.
Yeah, there you go.
Great
More generalizable.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kamal, and thank you for listening and watching for TopMedTalk. Be sure to check out more content on the live.ebpom.org platform. You can find other conversations. Monty was referring to some of those on our on-demand content. You can look at some of our content from our EBPOM meetings that it really highlights of the meetings that we've had, their virtual conferences over the last year. So do not miss those. There's some CME opportunities on there as well. So please do join us. We're back at 11:30 talking to Amy Wilkinson from Butterfly about that amazing ultrasound technology. Super excited to hear more about it. So thanks again. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Kamal.
Thanks, Brad.
TopMedTalk. Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, evidence-based perioperative medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.